Okay, let us go ahead. We'll get ourselves started again. So we're going to continue with our exercise of modeling this couch. And here's kind of where we are in the process. We're starting to create extrusions, and we're going to add some things to it to kind of keep on fleshing it out. We can add sweeps or blends or lots of different complex things. But this basic notion of reference planes, adding dimensions to reference planes, so that we can make some things parameters and some things fixed, whichever we want. It all starts with that, and then just going through and continuing to add these extrusions and solids and voids to go through and build up the object as we need to. So, we're actually in pretty good shape about where we want to be relative to this one. We're going to go ahead and take a look at, the vertical relationships a little bit and add this back to the couch too. But it's going to be a very slight variation on what we've been doing so far. Okay, because we've been looking at it all in terms of this floor plan view. Okay, and we're feeling pretty good about what's going on in there. In terms of looking at it from the top, as we go through and try to create this, I'm going to add one more reference plane, which is going to be the width of the back. No hassles. Let's just go through and do that. We'll say under Create, Reference Plane. And we'll kind of put it right across here. Now, to give that a dimension or a parameter, we'll annotate again, aligned. And you can always think about how you want to do this. I'm going to measure it off the back plane. You can measure it off the front. You can measure it a lot of different ways. The important thing is you don't want to over-constrain things. Always think about the hierarchy of how the geometry is defined, and then always think about if the back line moves, really what's going to drive the behavior where that front moves, and just kind of always link those things together. So in this case, it makes sense for me to kind of link it to that back. And let me add a parameter to that. What you don't want to do is this. I'll do something and I'll tell you why you don't want to do it. I don't want to put another dimension in that does this. Because now I actually have, it's over-constrained at this point. I'm saying it has to be fixed this way. It has to be a certain depth there. It wants to be a depth over here. It's going to get caught up in a little infinite loop of not being able to figure out what to do. And when we try to use this part, it'll say, hey, this thing's over-constrained. I need to drop a constraint. Okay, and you're never quite sure which one it's going to drop. Okay, so try to always think about there is a hierarchy, there's an order to how things get defined, and really drive it in that direction. Let's come on over here. We'll put a back on this couch. We'll say create an extrusion. Again, I'm going to draw something purposefully that's a little undersized so that I can then, and again, watch, I'm going to align to the green lines. Make sure you lock to the reference lines. It'll sometimes work to lock to the sides of other pieces of geometry, but it's a weaker reference. So it sometimes gets confused if you do that. So if you can, always lock to the green lines. That'll give you just a, sounds weird to say, but a stronger object. It'll be a little more robust. Okay. For this, let me go ahead and, I'm just going to make it like 3 feet tall right now, and we'll adjust all this in just a second. I'll say apply that. Let's take a look at this in 3D. I'll finish that up. Take a look at it in 3D. Okay. Kind of ugly right now, but we'll make it better. Let's, again, test it. I want to say, what if the back cushion was 6 inches? To see how that works. I'm doing what I call flexing the model, just making sure it works. Stretch that out. That looks pretty good. Let's make it not so deep, only 2 feet deep. Okay, not too bad. Okay. We still need to do a little adaptation to this, so let's go and think about it. Next step is really to think about it, in terms of the heights of things. Because right now I have all the heights just locked in to specific things. And I'd like to be able to control a couple different things. I might like to be able to control, the top of where the seat cushion is. I might want to be able to control the height of back. I might want to be able to control the height of the arms. There's 3 different things I might want to be able to control. And to control those things, the best thing to do is actually probably go to one of the elevation views. So I can, again, put in some reference planes, put some dimensions in there, and give myself some parameters. So I'll come on over, I'll do it in the front view. And I'm just going to give myself some reference planes again. It's also under the create. Let me put a line in there. Okay. In the same sense of doing it slowly but surely, I'm going to lock that line down to the base. And I'll call that the back height. Add a parameter. Okay, so far so good. Let's test it to make sure the back height moves the way we want it to. Let's say it's 5 feet tall on the back. Okay, looking pretty good. You now want to go through and have the back stretch to match that. So how do you do that? It's again an alignment. I'll choose that line. I'll choose that and lock it to it. Okay, and with any luck now, okay, it's going to stretch around. We can have a nice low back, kind of a high back. This is actually a pretty flexible little piece. Okay, let's go through and just add a few more parameters to it, and we'll call this one a pretty good little couch. Okay, oh, what do I want to do? I can, well, let's do the arm height. That'd be a good one to put in there. And for the seat, you can think about whether you want to talk about the top of the seat or the bottom of the seat, or just we could kind of control that a number of different ways. So for the arm height, again, that reference plane, I'm just going to put it in there for now. Let's go and annotate here, oops, from this line to that. And we'll add a parameter to that. Finally, oh, I should test this the same as we test most things. Well, actually, I didn't do the locking yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me align that to the top of that. Lock that in there. Okay, now we'll test that. Arm height is going to be, it's interesting, you know, things don't have to make physical sense in the standard way. Oh, that's interesting. It's going to be confused about that. Let's see what's going on. Constraints are not satisfied. Let's see if we can figure out why it's not doing it. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay. That's actually very good. Thank you. Okay, and what happened here in terms of the arm width can't be 8 foot if the length is only 8 feet. Okay, so there, we might want to build some smarts in to go ahead and control so you could only choose values that are logically consistent. Okay, we can use some formulas to do that. But thank you very much. Let's make that back to 1 foot 0. Beautiful. Okay, so I have my little enclosed, very private thing in here. It'll be a canopy couch before we're done with it. And we'll say front again. Let's go ahead and talk about that seat cushion, last reference plane. Actually, I always say last, but we'll put 2 in here really. I'm going to put 1 for the top of the cushion, 1 for the bottom of the cushion. And that's a very well-defined object now, so we can put an annotation in there. Here, down to there. I'll call that top of cushion. spelled right, but we'll fix that in a second. And then I'll also go through and put another annotation in just to control that depth right here. Now, this is one, again, I can make it a parameter, or I can just leave it a fixed relationship. Like, that'll always be 8 inches. You can decide whether you want to give people the ability to control that or not. And as you're pulling things out, you know, the Revit City, and you're sort of playing around with things, if you sort of sometimes wonder why you can change things and why you can't change things sometimes, it really just depends on how much control the creator of that object has given you. So if you have an object and they haven't given you a parameter, don't be shy about going back and adding a parameter in there for yourself. Okay, so you can add some reference planes or add some dimensions and make things stretchable as you need to. Okay, so again, I'm going to align the top of the cushion to this thing. I'm going to align the bottom of the cushion to that thing. Okay, and with any luck, I should have, oh, let's try the top of the cushion. Let's make it 2 feet tall. Great. Let's make it 1 foot tall. Now, some of you may recognize I was a little sloppy on the back over here. That back just kind of currently goes down to the ground. So if I really wanted to be very good, I might take this guy here. That's my back of the guy right here. And stretch him up. So I can align the back so it goes to the top of the cushion or the bottom of the cushion, whatever, you know, however you think of the couch being constructed. So I'll align that. Okay, and let's take a look at that. I think that's going to be pretty good now. A little cleaner on the back. So, let me go ahead in the top of the cushion there. Let me make that more of like a... Cushions are somewhere around 16 inches usually. Just so you know. The back height, let's make it 2'6". The arm height, let's make it 2'0". Arm width, those are some big old arms, aren't they? Okay, now you got this thing, you're loving it so much. This is one of the types you want to be able to put in, you know, and sort of say this is part of your product catalog. People can order this from you. You have a type that you want to create. So here's what you need to do. We're going to go through and now make the variations. We're going to make them as different family types. Okay, and how you do that is in the little family types dialog where we've been changing everything one at a time, we can go through and actually create a new family type, and that just gives it a name. So for example, if this is going to be my 8-foot long couch, 8-foot long thin arm, okay, that has these dimensions. Apply that to make sure it's in there. If I want to create a new type, I'll call it 8-foot long wide arm. Okay, has amazingly similar dimensions because nothing changed, but what I can do is say, make it 1'0", apply that, and now that's the wide arm version of it. Okay. Similarly, I can go ahead and say new. I'll make a 6-foot long wide arm version. And that's just going to have the dimensions 6 feet. I'll apply that. And now I have 3 different versions. 8-foot thin, 8-foot wide, 6-foot wide. Okay, and we can kind of keep on creating the variations. So those family types, the ones that I always say, choose, duplicate, and create your own type, that's how it's done. So you can set up some preliminary types that you want to have available to people, kind of right in here. You know, or if people can then go ahead and change these things for themselves later. Okay, so let's just pause there for a second. That was a whole lot of stuff, but that really is the essence of it. It's all about these parameters, throw those things in, be able to control, get the geometry, going from there. Beyond this, we're going to talk about materials, we're going to talk about visibility, and how you can use formulas to do interesting things. But that's the basic algorithm. So let's see how that's resonating with people. Sort of feel good? Okay, just save those things away. When you want to use this, you can load it into your project. I don't even think I have a project started right now. Let me just go through and kind of create a new project. Okay, we'll just put some walls down. That's pretty sloppy. Come back over here to my beautiful, there's a really handy tool here. There's a lot of views open right now. And what I can do is basically close everything that's hidden. It just gives me sort of a single window of each of the different families that I have open. I can load this into my project. And you'll see, there's my beautiful couch. Kind of hanging out way over there. That wasn't very good. Let me place a component. Zoom on in. So I can have that 8-foot one. I'll go through and put a 6-foot one next to it. Maybe I'll rotate that one to make a nice little furniture grouping. Okay, so far so good? Beauty. Then let's talk about the funny variations about how you take this one step further, because that's the basics of geometry, and whether you're going to do that with sweeps or blends or voids or whatever it is, it all kind of comes down to that same basic procedure. The next thing most people like to do is to start thinking about, adding these parameters to it, and there's different types of parameters. Family type parameters, you can go through and put a lot of different things in here: lengths, areas, volumes. We can go through and assign a material, and yes, no, those are some of the most interesting ones we'll talk about. Let's talk about materials. Because by materials, we have a couple of different things we can do to make that available. So let's go back over and kind of take a look at that couch and see what I have in mind over here. So right now, this couch is kind of sitting around with some incredibly boring set of materials. It's all a bunch of gray stuff. Okay, that's not looking very interesting. If I'd like to give you the ability to change things, maybe have one material for the cushions and another material over here for, the arms, we can go through and do that. Okay, and let's talk about how that happens. For each of these different extrusions or other types of forms, there is a material, and right now it just says by category. When materials come by category, that is the default material for the category. In this case, furniture gets used. So it's whatever the default, if something, a piece of furniture doesn't have any material assigned to it, it'll come in with this material. And by default, it's this gray material. It's just kind of this ambiguous gray color. Okay. If we'd like to go through and create a material that we can use for that, not to worry, what we can do is choose those arms. We'll say, instead of by category, we'll go through and, well, there's some of the default materials that are in there. Default lysorts, default roof, glass, poche, which is kind of gray. I'm going to create a new material in here. I'm going to create a new material. I can rename that. Oh, and I'm just going to call that wood arms. Okay. We can give that, some sort of appearance. For example, I can go through and, give it a kind of colorish appearance. Some sort of brown appearance. Or graphics appearance. We can also go through and map it into some sort of bitmap. We'll talk about this more in just a little bit. But we're going to learn to basically go through and assign materials, and kind of map them into different photographic textures that'll make them render nicely. But for now, let me just give it the material. Just call it wood arms. When you choose that, you can sort of see it's differentiated a little bit. Let's go over here, and I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to, make that my new material. I will just rename that. I'm going to call this furniture and couch cushions. I can rename that.
How do you build material groups in your file?
Well, we actually take them out of the library. So let's think if we can sort of figure this out. That's general. I'm trying to think about the best way to answer that, because I tend to think of that being in terms of doing it in the project as opposed to like Let me show you that in the project as opposed to in this, because this, for this, go ahead and put a placeholder for a material where we'll map it to something in the library. Okay, let's do that. So again, where'd it go? There it is. Hang on. I undid something. Let me delete that. Rename that. Fabric cushions. Okay, and for this fabric cushions, I'm just going to give it a relatively light material, kind of a pale gray. Okay, that back cushion has that. This light cushion over here doesn't have it, so I can define it to fabric cushions. Okay, so I have this thing defined as two different materials now. And what will happen now is if I bring it into my project, or anyone who uses it, there'll actually be two different materials that are going to show up inside the material browser called fabric cushions, okay, and called wood arms. So let me go ahead and save this. Okay, so a lot of people will define things this way. We'll just go ahead and put some materials in here. There's sort of a default material, and when you load it into the project, let me load this into the project. Come back over here. We'll take a look at this. You'll see it has some notion of color here. If I edit it, you'll see I don't really have the choice of changing the material. The material is actually kind of locked in here now because I've assigned a material, but I don't really have a parameter that lets me change it very easily. Okay, so this is the way a lot of things that come in from some of the default library, if you pull them from Revit City or something, they'll often come in, there's a material assigned, but you just can't get to it very easily. So how you handle objects that look like that are, if you go to the materials library, which is under Manage, you actually find that material is in here. It's fabric cushions, it's listed here. Somewhere down here, there's something called wood arms. Okay. It, however, doesn't go through and have like an appearance to it. It only has sort of a color to it. So if I go through and with these custom materials, these non-standard materials that I've just sort of added in there, it won't have an appearance. So what we have to do is actually go through and map kind of that material to a specific appearance. And let me see if I can even do that back over where in the family. If we want to take a material, for example, wood arms, and map it to an appearance, there's a button over here that lets us remap it. And this is where we go back to the default material library and we can go through and pull things. So for example, I'll come on down here and map that into, for example, like white oak or something like that with a medium gloss. I'll choose that there. Now, wood arms is going to be defined as having that material appearance. You can say OK to that. Actually, just to answer your question better, let me see if I can actually do that back over here too, because I think I probably can. If I say choose that, and I'll choose the material, I'll go to the appearance. Yeah, I could have done it over here too. So if you want to map it from just the default gray You can do it back over here. So again, I'll choose wood oak medium gloss. Okay, and that'll have the appearance there. Okay, if you put it into the family, when people load it in, it comes automatically for them. If you don't put it in, it comes in as gray, and then they have to make the change over there. Let me do the same thing to these fabric cushions over here. Fabric cushion is currently just defined as a sort of whitish color. There's really not much to it. If I change its appearance from this default gray, let's see if I can find something over here. Gravel, herringbone, linen, leather. Oh, we saw leather? Oh, leather's in here somewhere. Dark brown leather. We'll go for that. Okay, we'll let that be the fabric of the cushions. I'll say apply that or okay to that, and we can go. Now, if you have a render appearance and the render appearance has a color and you'd like to use the color from the render appearance, kind of the base color, like I put brown leather on this thing. So if I'd like the shading to show up as brown, I can say use the render appearance. It'll grab the color from the photographic image. And we're going to learn about how you can pull in any photographic image. So if you have a fabric catalog or snapshots of some interesting fabric, we can go ahead and use those too. But the default library has things like just brown leather and kind of simple woven fabrics, things like that. Say okay. So now it's a brown leather couch with these wooden arms. Okay, and let's load that into the project. And I'll load it back into my project one. Let's take a look at this. Okay. Notice over here, since I already loaded in there, I don't think it's going to show it right. Let's just take a look at the materials over here. Let's see how much picked it up. Fabric cushions. No, it didn't pick it up by default since it was already placed in here. I think if I place it again, it'll go through and put it in there. But again, you can swap that out. Let me say leather. Okay, now, the reason we like to go through and apply materials is this. Okay, as you're looking at those, if we turn on realistic rendering, not sure if you can see that very well. Let's see if I zoom on in even further. You see, it actually has a little bit of wood grain to it, and it's hard to see over here. It does have kind of a stipply kind of, or a wrinkly kind of leather texture to it. So it'll render properly if we assign the right materials. Now, assigning materials is actually sort of a very powerful thing. So by default, you can go ahead and put these materials in, and whoever's going to pick things up can use your materials, you know, or they can go back and try and figure out what material you defined it is and redefine the materials that way. But actually, that's kind of hard. Most people that you hand things to may not figure that out. And if you would like to make it much easier on them so they can actually just go change these materials very quickly, what we should do is just set up a parameter that'll let them change it. Okay, so we've locked it into a set value in the same way that we could have locked a dimension to a set value, and they could go through extraordinary measures to change it. But if you make it a parameter, then we'll make it really easy for them to change it. Okay, and let's talk about how you do that, because that'll be the final little piece that'll really make it very nice for the people who are consuming your objects. So to do that, what we're going to do is go back over to that part. Good old couch mornings kind of hanging around over here. We'll grab this guy, these arms, and you'll see they're currently assigned to be wooden arms. Okay, if we like that to be a parameter as opposed to just a single material, okay, this wood arms will be the default. Okay, it'll come in by default to wood arms, but then we'll let them change it. And how we do that is right next to the little wood arms, we can say associate a family parameter. Click that, and we can add a parameter. So this is going to be my arm material. Okay. And when I do that, what's going to happen? it's going to be defaulting to wood arms, but it's going to be some parameter that will let us change it. So because we added a parameter to it, if I go to the family dialog, you'll actually find arm material currently set to wood arms. Okay, but we can change it to something else. So the user can say, you know, I don't like wood arms so much. I would like to go to the materials dialog and choose something else instead. Okay, just makes it easy on them. Okay, same way over here. For this brown leather, let me grab them both. Instead of just fabric cushions, I'm going to add a parameter. I'll just call that cushion material. Say OK. So now in the parameters dialog, we have both those things. Always set to the default that you gave, but giving them the option to change it. Okay. So now why is that good? So we say OK to that. I will save this away. Let me load this into the project. Let's go back hanging around over here. So here's that couch. Let's edit its properties. Okay, now we have the ability to change that here. So we can go through and change this, and let me even duplicate this. It's going to be 8 foot, thin arm, not leather, because we don't like leather and we don't want to have that kind of material on our project. So we'll choose some other material. And I'll just, let me see if I can find some nice fabric or textiles, they sometimes call them. Fabric. That's our fabric cushions. Well, we might have to find some of our own. Rigid insulation. What kind of materials are these? System. Unassigned. Wood. Glass. That's just not a very promising list, is it? Good question. We have to actually go through and load in some other libraries. I'll get a better answer than the one I'm going to give you right now. There's some fabrics in there. Well, what's happening is down here there's a whole collection of different libraries. So there's the Autodesk Materials Library. There's another library here called the AEC Materials Library. Let me go looking in there, because that's where they're hiding now. So let me go, oh, we'll make it linen beige. Or canvas blue stripe. That sounds pretty good. Okay, you can see a little picture of it over here. So there are different materials libraries, and we're going to add our own things to those libraries. You can probably even find some commercial ones there too. That looks good. So what's going to happen now? I've redefined, oops. Actually, I changed the material appearance. No, I didn't. Okay, let me do this. You say new, create a new material. I'm going to say that this is going to be, actually, I think I already added it in there. I just didn't point to it. Fabric, canvas blue stripe, put it upstairs. Okay, it's already there. There it is. So now canvas blue stripe. So if I do that, we got the brown leather one, we got the canvas blue stripe one. So that's why we go through and put things in as parameters. It just gives people the easy ability to change. Same thing over here. Let's edit that one. Okay, and we'll change that. Go to my fabrics. Now, you may be liking this changing the materials around so much that you decide, you know, arms I can live with being wood or not wood or something like that. That may be a family thing, but maybe this issue of the material is actually so customizable, we want to give you the ability to change that on a piece-by-piece basis. as opposed to having it be a whole family thing. So you can order an 8-foot couch, the geometry is tied to the family, but the fabric will really be a piece-by-piece choice. Okay? And if you want to give people that kind of flexibility, it's very straightforward. We'll just go back over to the family again. And as we go through and take this material property, let me modify it. Currently it's set up as a type parameter. A type parameter is you need to create a new type to have a difference. If I change it over to being an instance parameter, you do it for me. Looks like it's still in the same place. Cushion material. Let's see if that worked. Let me load that in. Come back over to 3D. Okay, now you notice the cushion material is actually out here at the higher level. I don't need to change the type. I could just go ahead and change it for that one individual one. So if I want him to be that kind of fabric linen, or what would they call that? Was it fabric cushions? No, it was linen. I forget what it was called now. Linen beige. So I can change that on a piece-by-piece basis. So you always have the choice of whether something is an instance parameter or a family parameter. And again, where do you make that change? It's as you're creating your pieces and you're assigning materials to them. In the parameters, you have the choice of, for any parameter, you can choose whether it's considered an instance or a type parameter. And that's just kind of the span of control issue. Okay. Let's go ahead and give you one last thing before we kind of like take off for today. And that is the issue of making things that have a little bit of smartness relative to numbers. Let's talk about that. Okay. We can actually use formulas to go through and define things. So for example, if we wanted to have a numeric relationship between two different parameters, we could do that. So we could, for example, say that, you know, we want the length of the couch to always be twice as much as the width. We could set some sort of numeric relationship we want to have between things by just setting up some different formulas here. So really, you can add all sorts of different things in here. There's a whole formula language in here. You can add things together, subtract things together, do sines, cosines, e to the x, you know, all sorts of different ability to go through and change and kind of make things relate to each other. And every once in a while we want to do that. We want to have a hard relationship between different things. So for example, if we were going to, for example, do a smart part that was doing sort of the framing in a wall, something like that. So I'm just drawing the plan or the elevation view of a wall, and we have something here that's called length. Okay. If we wanted to go through and have an object that was going to do the framing in the wall, figure out how many studs were going to be in the wall, something like that, we can say that, you know, every time we kind of, we want these to be spaced at 16 inches. Yeah. We could basically say, let's go ahead and basically create an array of these different studs where the number of the array is equal to, we'll just take the length and divide it by 16, and we'll go ahead and make an integer out of that. Okay. So if we did something like that, we could, no matter what the length is, go through and compute really how many studs are necessary based on the length. Okay. In the similar sort of way, if we had a big old table, okay, and it typically had 4 legs, but if we wanted to, as it got longer, to have 6 legs or 8 legs, whatever it is, we could take the length and we'd sort of, let's go through and divide that by some distance for every 4 feet that's added. And again, we'll put some sort of integer on it, so it's always sort of a whole number. We'll compute the number of legs based on some sort of formula that relates those things together. So that's where we'll go next time, but just to finish it this time, let's just kind of show you how we might be able to use that. If, for example, and it's not going to make much sense for a couch, it'd make more sense for a lot of other objects, but if I wanted to build in a relationship like that, right now, for example, the length and the depth are they're two completely independent numbers. I could have any length and any depth. If I wanted to create a relationship between those things, what I can do is, again, put some sort of formula in here. So I can say that the length is always going to equal to depth times 3. Okay, and that's going to sound okay. Right now it's about the same. If I went through and changed that, though, to 1, you'll see the length will be 3. Or if I change that to 5, the length will be 15. So I can go through and start building in relationships and put those things in there. And again, a couch is not a great example of where you'd use that. But start thinking about ways like that, because in your objects, if there is some sort of relationship that you always want, another good example is if any of you were doing bookshelves or something like that, and you're trying to figure out how to put a number of shelves independently spaced or evenly spaced, there's really a formula that's probably in there to go ahead and help you figure out what the length between, or the distance between the shelves is. That's based on the overall height and however many slots you want to put in there. So formulas can be very, very useful. Okay, let us break for today. So you have the basics of, you can create parts, you can go through and make them sizable by putting the parameters in there, you can associate materials. I think you have most of what you need to get the assignment done. Okay, so go ahead, jump into the assignment, see if you can kind of at least sketch up what these initial parts are, figure out what your strategy is. So when we come on back on Thursday, we can answer any questions and kind of get you steered in the right direction for some of the problems you're having. Okay, so let's adjourn for today, and we'll see y'all on Thursday morning.